All righty, Karen, looks like it's just gonna be me and you. Um, so maybe people will come and join later. That's all right, they'll catch up. I just want you to feel comfortable. You can type any questions into the chat bar at any time. I may not see them in real time, but I have a little section at the end. So if you come across anything that's confusing, I'll try and answer it as we go. But otherwise, I'll pick it back up at the end, okay? All righty. So that's me. I'm Maddie. I'm a PT here in Bend. I'm originally from Indiana. So born and raised in Evansville, Indiana. Good old Midwest. I moved to Bend about 1.5 years ago. And really loving it. It's awesome out here. So I enjoy working with neuro patients. I actually worked with MS patients on research studies with robotics and like a locomat and a geo, which actually helps assist you with walking. So it was a really cool study there, and got to see a lot of different MS patients. So our objectives for today, just kind of reviewing MS, what causes it or why it's happening, what's going on in the brain, common presentations, the different types of MS, how PT can help, which is really my main goal here today, is just getting it out there that PT is a big part in medical management of MS. If people don't know, I feel like MS gets kind of lost, or I don't get to see it until way down the road. So then we'll go through some screening tools that you can try at home, and some exercises or activities that are good for most people, especially after you try some of those screening tools, it'll make a little more sense. We'll talk about some local resources, then we'll wrap up. So multiple sclerosis is a disease where the body's immune system attacks the central nervous system. So autoimmune disease. This lovely picture here shows you the difference between the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. So MS can affect anything in the brain or the spinal cord, as shown here, but it won't touch the peripheral nerves, shown on the right there. So the little guys that actually travel out to the muscles. All right, we'll talk more about the pathophys and why MS is happening. But first, let's talk about the different clinical presentations. So there are 4 different types. The first one is a clinically isolated syndrome. It's not super common. It's like a one-time thing. It's inflammation, demyelination that lasts greater than 24 hours. The person has neurological symptoms, but it doesn't last too long. It kind of comes and goes, and they regain full function. However, these people are more likely to get diagnosed with MS later on in life, especially if there's lesions present on an MRI. So a big part of diagnosis with MS nowadays is done with MRI and looking at the sclerotic tissue in the brain or in the spinal cord, and especially seeing like how it's progressing. Are we getting more tissues that are turning extra white, really sclerotic in there? And if someone has this isolated syndrome, but no lesions are seen on the MRI, it's less likely that they progress to MS, but they're still at a higher likelihood than the average Joe. A lot of times it's treated with medication, and it can actually delay the onset. So it's good to know that this exists, so it's not just written off. We can do a little preventative work there. All right, number 2, the most common relapsing remitting. Um, this is what most people with MS have. It has clear periods of attacks or exacerbations, followed by some recovery. Most of the time, there is not full recovery. You usually don't regain everything, but then you're stable for a while. So then you have exacerbation, and then you're feeling good, and then exacerbation. And you can see these little arrows represent different MRI activity. Like that's when you're actually seeing the sclerotic tissue show up in the brain, or again, the spinal cord. Either of those are possible options. But this is by far the most common. It's commonly progresses to secondary progressive multiple sclerosis, which is this guy here. And that's just when those remissions become so short that they just kind of disappear. And it's just kind of a continual progression. Sometimes there's some plateaus, but you're not getting that recovery. You're not getting that point where you regain anything. It's like worse and then plateau and worse and plateau. And that's pretty common for what relapsing remittent moves into. And the fourth and final one is primary progressive. It's the same thing basically as secondary progressive, only you kind of start there. You don't ever really get to relapse and regain some of that function. There's not a whole lot of periods of stability in there. It's usually a little bit faster. Usually your progression starts fast, it's gonna continue fast, versus if it's really slow, it can be slow for a really long time. Especially with all the wonderful new medications out and about. But those are the four main types of MS. Yeah, Karen, you're welcome to share what kind of MS you've got. I would love to hear, so we can hit on that a little more, get some one-on-one webinar action going. But otherwise, we'll talk about kind of what's going on in the brain, because it can seem a little foreign. You're just like, okay, sclerosis, what does that mean? Why is it happening? What's actually going on? So what happens, people with MS, their blood-brain barrier lets B cells and T cells into the central nervous system. So B cells and T cells are part of your immune system. They help attack dangerous little bacteria and stuff that get into your body, and they're great. But they're not really supposed to be in our central nervous system at all. So when they get in there, it can attack the oligodendrocytes, which are the lovely little cells that produce myelin. So myelin is this fatty sheath that you can see in this picture here, and it increases the speed of conduction of our nerves. So nerves work with electrical impulses. Those little fatty sheaths make them quicker. So when our immune system attacks that myelin sheath, it's going to decrease speed of conductivity, and if it continues, then eventual loss. So it's like the circuit's being broken, that electrical current's not going all the way through. So it only attacks in the central nervous system. Like I said earlier, it's not going to touch those peripheral nerves. Those B cells and T cells see those as totally normal. So this myelin, it is able to remyelinate, but it's usually slow. It's those cells that are already getting attacked, so they're at a disadvantage. And even when the myelin sheaths do get repaired, it's less effective. It's just not as efficient. So that's what's going on. So this is one little nerve fiber, and there are just tons of them up there. So that being said, MS can affect any spot in the brain and spinal cord. Doesn't have to be anything specific. It's never like, oh, it's definitely the hands or it's definitely the trunk. Every person with MS presents totally different, which makes it very variable. It's hard to stereotype anything. It really requires the most individualized approach, probably of any neurodegenerative disease. Everything else is a little more stereotypical. You kind of see commonalities, especially within phenotypes, but MS is a little bit different. There are some common symptoms. So by far the most common is fatigue, and that can be subjective fatigue or objective fatigue. So subjective fatigue is like mentally you feel tired, almost kind of like depression, you just don't have the motivation. Objective fatigue is when you get weaker with physical activity, and it happens quickly. Very commonly to see ambulation deficits. People are walking different, and it's because those sclerotic tissues are affecting different parts of your lower extremity. Places in your brain that tell your legs what to do, things are a little off. It's disrupted. That pathway is. Same with weakness and sensory. All of those pathways, unfortunately, come right through the brain and spinal cord. Oh, awesome. Very cool, Karen. Well, welcome. Thank you for doing awesome OT work for 45 years. Wow, that is something. Woo. Okay. So definitely balance is affected, usually due to some sensory changes, weakness, some spasticity. Visual changes are very common, and usually tested with diagnosis. They'll test the speed of the conduction of the optic nerve. Mood and behavior changes. Again, that's all controlled by your brain, so those are really common. Respiratory issues can become more serious, and a lot of times, especially at the end of the MS progression, that becomes a lot more serious, and something to look out for. So we'll talk further about respiratory and respiratory strengthening and all that fun stuff. Oh yes, and cognitive changes, yes. Cognitive changes for sure. Good OT work there, Karen. I love it. We should have done a dual podcast. It would have been wonderful. But yes, cognitive changes are huge as well. So we have to think about MS as having primary and secondary effects. So primary effects would be those that are considered like what's changed from that sclerotic tissue. Like that nerve right there is damaged, it affects this quad muscle, say. So then you're gonna have some weakness, and you might be walking differently. Secondary effects are gonna be the fact that you're walking differently, and now you're sitting more often, and now your hip is really tight, and maybe you get a hip flexor contracture, or you get really deconditioned, and now you're out of breath, just by walking around your house. So MS exacerbations kind of lead into that as well. So when you have an exacerbation, you're gonna decrease your physical activity, which is gonna lead to some increased weakness, that deconditioning. You'll see a functional decline most likely with an exacerbation, maybe not, maybe it's more personality changes. Either way, it's gonna affect how much you're moving, how you're moving, and it kind of just cycles through, and then you're stable for a little bit, and before you know it, another exacerbation. So it's kind of a vicious cycle that we want to kind of break up a little bit. we want to we want to get rid of this little circle quite as much as we can, which will help diminish this. And so we'll get a few more cycles in there. So things that are really commonly problematic with people with MS is thermosensitivity. The heat affects people with MS differently. So you usually see decreased physical performance, fatigue quicker, just can't physically perform like you would in a controlled climate environment. So being from Bend, we're in a desert, so it's really hot here. And people in Bend love to stay active. So it's kind of a hard double whammy here. You're trying to stay active, but it's super hot out sometimes, especially with aerobic exercise. Strength training is going to be important as well. And like my little emoji says, it's all about volume. So if you feel like you're getting really fatigued after 10 minutes of aerobic exercise, take a break. Interval training has shown really good results with people with MS. Don't try and do like an hour straight. Take a break, especially if you're getting some pseudo exacerbations, which stress, heat, exercise, some of those things can push into a pseudo exacerbation. The thing to remember though is that a pseudo exacerbation is not a true exacerbation. There's not actual changes in your central nervous system. It's just the symptoms that get exacerbated and it goes away. So interval training with strength and aerobic exercise is going to be huge. Another thing is pre-cooling. So cooling vests are wonderful to use before, during, after exercise. There's a lot of great ones out there. I think the MS Society has a bunch listed and offer like some free ones if you need financial support. But those things are going to just change the way you can stay active. Other things, range of motion is huge with MS. Again, you have to think about, is it secondary or primary? Did we have an exacerbation and then we were in bed for a while and our ankle was pointed the whole time and now we've got a little bit of a foot drop and that toe's getting caught on things? Is that a contracture or is it spasticity? So spasticity is velocity dependent. You can move slowly through the range of motion, but in a quick motion, you're going to get that catch and it's going to be pretty rigid and hard to move. Whereas prolonged positioning can lead to a contracture, which is just the shortening of that muscle where no matter what speed you're trying to move it, it's just not going anywhere. So PT kind of comes in at that secondary phase. So things that are caused from exacerbations or from primary problems can really help to kind of maintain function if we get rid of some of those extra problems, which is usually, it can be a large part of your symptoms and why you're not moving as much or why you're not as active. So the great thing is trying to tease out what's secondary and what's primary. So again, how PT helps, individualized. Like I said, everyone's different. So you got to look at you. Unfortunately, you can't go on the Dr. Google and find the 5 best exercises for MS because they don't really exist. The 5 best exercises are going to be the ones that are individualized for you. Helping to improve and maintain function, looking at gait, seeing if we can make it more efficient so we're not using so much energy expenditure just getting from A to B. Helping to reduce those secondary effects like I was talking about. We don't want to be deconditioned and we don't want that to be what's limiting us. We would rather have it be the weakness or the the balance or something that's a little bit a little harder to work on. So We want all the problems on our problem list to be primary ideally, and you wouldn't need me. And then we can also help reduce fall risk, which can lead to just a ton more of problems that we want to avoid. Okay, so again, looking at primary versus secondary and you as an individual and what your goals are, what you're trying to do. I mean, are you trying to bike? Are you trying to hike? Are you just trying to get around your house? Really just tailoring things to your goals and your function. So another huge thing is coordinating with other healthcare providers. It's much easier for patients to get high quality care when you're in contact with the neurologist and the OT, or the respiratory therapist, or maybe a dietitian. There's just a whole gambit of healthcare providers that can help with multiple sclerosis management, and it really helps when players are all on the same page. So we want to all be working toward the same goal. Okay, so talking about some assessments to try at home. The first one is going to be called the 6-minute walk test. It's very popular in the PT world, but I feel like a lot of times with MS, sometimes it can go unnoticed. You'll try the timed up and go, which is like 10 feet, and you're just not going to see the effects of fatigue and how fatigue is going to affect your gait or your balance or your turning or anything like that. So this is a great one to try at home, is just finding a distance that you know, and then walking for 6 minutes and seeing how far you can walk. You're free to use any assistive devices that you need. Take standing rest breaks, take sitting rest breaks, just keep that clock running and see how far you get in 6 minutes. And also what would be good to do is just kind of notice how you're moving at minute 1 versus minute 5 or 6. Like, were you just jetting off your chair at 1 minute and keeping a normal pace, but then 5 minutes, now we're starting to have to lean our trunk a whole lot, our legs feel heavier, we're more tired, maybe we're not the most balanced, especially if there's turns involved in this distance. Just kind of being cognizant of how you're moving as you're getting more fatigued with the walking. So here are some lovely averages. I know that's a lot of numbers and a lot of abbreviations here. So mild MS would be considered categorized as an EDSS, or an expanded disability status scale, of 0 to 3.5. So usually those people are fully ambulatory, maybe starting to use an assisted device, especially for longer distances. So people with that level of MS are usually walking about 560 or so feet, plus or minus about 100 feet. So yeah, I put feet and meters because meters are standard, but no one knows how much a meter is. So those aren't, like, you don't need to add those distances together or anything. That was just for your convenience. Moderate MS would be that EDSS score of 4 to 6.5. Definitely going to be ambulating with some kind of assistive device. They're walking almost half the distance of a mild MS patient, but there's also a ton of variability. So unfortunately, since MS is so variable, research is not the best. People keep getting different answers, and so that's why there's such a big gap in there. But those are just averages from the latest data of what people with those EDSS scales of MS usually come out to. Oh, I don't know. Yes, Karen, are you familiar with the EDSS? It seems like it's in all the research, and It's not my favorite scale, that's for sure. It leaves out a whole lot. Um, but it is very commonly used in MS. Another respiratory screen to kind of check in and see how your respiratory function is holding up is prolonged phonation. So this is a quick, easy screen. You're gonna try and hold an ah sound for as long as you can without taking your breath. So you're gonna take a deep breath in and go for as long as you can. So the goal is about 20 seconds. Um, you if you're below 15 seconds or really struggling, um, a definite respiratory program or trying some exercises would be beneficial. If you're below 10, respiratory assessment and strengthening would be very important, just to help try and build up some of those respiratory muscles, like maybe even some positioning. I'm trying to open up some of that thoracic cavity, get some more air exchange in there. But quick, easy screen to see how phonation and if your respiratory is affected at all. All right, exercise time. I did go ahead and pick out some exercises that are good for balance and some that are good for respiratory function, especially if you just naturally feel off balance, or if you're feeling out of breath. So this was my goofy little cartoon um, that I found online, but I thought it was cute. Okay, so there's my goofy face. This is what we call tandem stance. So you're standing heel to toe, um, with a little bit of a knee bend. Really what we're doing is we're making your base of support really narrow. So you're gonna wanna wobble side to side more. So trying to stand like that for 30 seconds each way. Usually one way is harder than the other. Um, and you wanna watch out for not having like tons of arm movement or like you're really wobbling around. Um, and then if it's too hard, you can move your feet further apart in like a stride stance, like further forward and to the side, if you need to widen that base of support. And then if you need something harder, you can try single leg stance. So single leg stance is something every PT loves to work on because it's crucial for gait. Every time you take a step, you're standing on one leg. So we would love if everyone was super stable and was standing on one leg to help reduce fall risk. So this guy has his arms like this. That's kind of silly. You don't need to do that. But you definitely do want to watch for excessive upper body movement. And then trying to stay on there for, again, 30 seconds is usually considered normal. If that is still too easy and you're just killing the balance game, try standing on something squishy. I would definitely advise doing this with someone around, or standing next to a chair, or a lot of times what people do balance stuff in the corner, so that they have walls on both sides. Or if really scared, you can go ahead and do it in a corner with a chair in front of you. So you've kind of got a surface to grab onto, whichever way you start to lose your balance. But if you're doing these and they're still too easy, you can even try closing your eyes. And that tends to be a big game changer. No one likes doing it with their eyes closed because everyone relies on their vision a lot for balance. So to take that out kind of relies solely on vestibular and proprioception, which gets a little more challenging and really test that connection from brain to the rest of the body. I didn't have a picture of this one, but I love cone taps or cup taps. So standing on one leg, trying to put a cup on the floor in front of you and just trying to alternately tap the cup with your toe. Um, and can you make it without knocking over the cup? Can you do it without holding onto any other surfaces? Can you do it 10 times in a row? Do you feel like it's going smoothly? Is it really easy on one side, really hard on the other? Um, Things to kind of cue you in that there might be a balance issue, um, and how much control we have with those lower extremities. Okay. Moving on to some respiratory exercises. So phonation was really tough, or you find yourself out of breath a lot. Um, it could be due to some positioning. People these days tend to sit forward, their heads over their laptops. They're kind of typing like this, or we're sitting on our phone. Everything happens forward and kind of punched. So this is kind of the opposite. It's a beautiful pec stretch. So putting both hands on a doorway, or you can do one at a time, stepping one foot in front of the other, and then shifting your weight forward so you can kind of control how much of a stress or stretch you're getting on that pec muscle. You don't just want to jump right in, just ease yourself into it till you feel a deep stretch on the front of your chest. You can play around with the angle of your arm because that pec muscle is a big fan shape. So you're going to hit different fibers with different elevations of your elbow. And then trying to hang out there for about 30 seconds. With stretching stuff, 30 seconds or more is ideal. To actually see some tissue elongation, we need a little bit longer. Otherwise, our body just kind of tolerates being in those positions and moves on. It's just like, all right, that was uncomfortable. Now let's go back to this position. And no change is really made. Kind of similar, some scapular squeezes are going to also open up that thoracic cavity, give your lungs more space to expand. You can get a deeper breath, you can get more air exchange. You can do this sitting, standing, when you're driving at a red light. Just try and pull those shoulder blades down and back. We don't want your ears up to your shoulders. Everyone's upper traps are pretty darn strong. So we want to pull them out, open that chest up a little bit more, and just trying to hold for about 10 seconds and build a little endurance with those postural muscles. But a lovely postural strengthening. Diaphragmatic breathing is also another thing that you can do to help kind of strengthen that diaphragm. So diaphragm is one of the main muscles that help with inspiration. To do this, you can place one hand on your chest and one on your belly, and then trying to take a deep breath in and keeping your hand on your chest still while your one on your belly rises. So that's going to force that diaphragm to contract. When your diaphragm contracts, it pushes down, and so then your belly will rise. And then with exhalation, or you're breathing out, that diaphragm should relax, it come back up, and your belly goes down. So we don't want to just breathe with our chest. We want to get that diaphragm working. Again, it's going to open up space for more air exchange. We've got to get that oxygen. Okie dokie. So spasticity is very common with MS. Occurs when there's disruption in an upper motor neuron, which is a fancy way of saying a neuron in your brain or spinal cord. There's some evidence that low load prolonged stretches can help with spasticity. Some argue you can't, and you just need to help reduce the secondary causes. And then everyone's spasticity is a little bit different, so I can't really tell you how to stretch your exact spastic muscle because it's going to be different than everyone else's. And again, positioning is going to be wonderful. So you don't want to cause any kind of ulcers. You don't want to be having that spasticity push into anything, especially like later on in a progression if you're in a wheelchair. or if you're just sitting somewhere commonly, you don't want to fight that spasticity too much, and you don't want to be in a position where it's commonly elicited. So again, spasticity is velocity dependent. So you want to kind of try not to trigger that, so you're not jerking into a spastic motion. So yes, I would say decreasing secondary effects and positioning are going to be the main key ways that PT can help with spasticity. Some resources here. So the National Multiple Sclerosis Society is wonderful. They have different chapters for different states. They have virtual classes like yoga or just movement classes. They have support groups. I think they have caregiver support groups as well. So just making sure people feel supported and understood, and just a little outlet sometimes, and also to get moving, and with instructors who know how to make modifications. So that's a lovely resource at the national level. There's a lady named Rebecca who works at St. Charles, who usually leads a local support group. And that's her phone number. I've emailed with her a couple times. She is not having currently meeting because of COVID, like most places. I know the Bend Athletic Club usually or used to have a swim group that met once a week, but I couldn't find anything online, and I called the front office. The lady did not know what I was talking about, so I'm not quite sure if that is still happening or if it's just postponed until COVID kind of clears up and it's a little more safe to do group activities in an enclosed space. So I'm not positive on that, but keep checking in, because that's a lovely way. You've got that pool that helps with thermoregulation. So it's not super hot. You're not overheating. That water helps keep your body cool throughout the activity, which will usually help you be active a little bit longer. So those are a couple of resources. You're welcome to reach out to Rebecca. She's a lovely lady. But as of right now, I don't think that there's anything in town that's meeting in person, unfortunately. Unless Karen, if you have something, let me know. I would love to hear about it. I've been trying to do as much research as I can. Everything is changing so quickly, and so I'm just trying to keep up here. All righty. Okay. And then if there are any questions, free to ask them now. Got done a little early. But I hope you guys learned a few things. Tried some screens, see how you do. And if you're concerned at all, you're welcome to reach out to us. I don't see any questions in the chat box or anything like that. So we will just move on to wrap up. You're welcome if you're interested in doing cash value or cash rates. We do offer $150 cash rate here. If you were to sign up in the next week or so. And then also, of course, we take most insurance. I think we take all except for like Aetna and Moda maybe, but all major ones: Medicare, Regence, Pacific, Cigna, all those main players. Take all those and would love to go through those as well. You can call, you can go to our website and request an appointment. You can email and set up through email if you'd rather do that, and that's more convenient for you. But other than that, that about concludes. So thank you so much for listening. Hopefully I didn't bore you all too much. I could talk about neurodegenerative stuff all day. So please call and let me know if you have any questions or concerns. Karen, it was so wonderful to meet you. I w- is there MS specialist in town? Like MS specialist PT or MS specialist neurologist, or I'm not sure. I know they're with PT, there you don't really specialize. Oh, neurologist. Yes, there is a neurologist in town who's a specialist in MS. She works at the Band of Neuro Associates, and I am totally blanking on her name. It's something with an S that I can't quite remember her last name. Starts with an S. She's a lady. Band Neuro Associates. If you go onto her web or onto their website, you'll see it listed. They have their providers, and she is an MS specialist here in town, which is really nice. Oh, Laura Shaben. Yes, that's I believe that's her. So Laura Shaven, that's the MS specialist here in Bend. But yeah, so hopefully that's helpful. And I hope you guys had fun hanging out with me. It's been a lovely night, but I don't want to take up any more of your time. Give us a call if you need us, but it was great. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for joining, Karen. And if you're listening to this recording, thank you for listening to me for this long. It's been super fun. All right, bye.